Hiya, I'm Jasper, and welcome to your video review for Star Trek Voyager, Season 7. So, as always, I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the furry. To start off the furry, it's a Star Trek series, so there's going to be some anthropomorphic aliens and some creature-y type things, so moving on to the good and the bad. So, start off with Unimatrix Zero, Part 2. Still not my favorite two-parter, still kind of weird to have that as the season finale, and then, have to start with that. Still don't feel like her boyfriend in the Unimatrix Zero had the great chemistry, and meh for the amount of Queen interactions. Like, again, it just kind of cheapens the Borg a bit. As much as I like having the Borg Queen and finding excuses to have the Borg Queen, okay. Moving on from there, it's imperfection where Seven's cortical node is failing. It annoys me because nanoprobes can solve literally everything. Like, before this episode and after this episode, they solve brain-related things and necrotized tissues, this, that, and the other thing. But for some reason, they can't solve cortical node issues. They can't either fix the cortical node, and they also can't just fix her brain to work without the cortical node, which is just bullshit. It's also, now that I think about it, even bullshit that they weren't able to remove the rest of the, bits and bops from her system if she's still making nanoprobes, because they should be able to repair once whatever thing is yanked out of her, or the doctor should be able to replicate her like a new lung, a new arm joint, a new whatever, so she really shouldn't have to have any Borg components left in her, but whatever. Next is Drive. Once again, Tom doesn't care. They shouldn't be getting married, and the race is not the time to be having your little couples thing. And like Tom right at the very end just like kind of brings it back just a little bit to be like, okay, so you're not the worst person in the world when it comes to a relationship with B'Elanna. But I don't think he does it enough, and I don't want to beat the dead horse that I had for my review in Season 6, but I don't think that they work together as a couple here. The Demon Planet version of them, I think, worked, but not this one. Okay, moving on to Repression. I love me a good Tuvok episode. This was a decent Tuvok episode. How long into this episode did you get before you realized who the bad guy was? I'm not going to say who it was, just in case you haven't seen this episode before for some reason and want to see it, but how long into the episode before you realized who it was? I don't know for the first time that I watched it, because, I was much younger the first time that I watched it, but this time around, I feel like I got it pretty early on, and I feel like most people will get it pretty early on, but it's about the journey, not the destination here. Next is Critical Care, and it's so funny to me, because if you look at it in a certain light, this shows, like, why socialized medicine is needed, because it helps their society function. But if you look at it in another light, it shows you just how fucking terrible socialized medicine can be. Because of just the fucked up shit that was happening where, like, I'm going to call it hemoglobin because I don't remember the name of it, but the cytoglobin, I'm going to call it cytoglobin, the cytoglobin that they had for the rich people just keep on living longer because, they contribute more to society, versus the poor motherfuckers who, like, literally it could help them live, like, at all, as opposed to just extend their already super long and healthy lives, like, or they're gonna die in minutes without this type of product. Like, it's so funny that you can see this from either side, and that's one of the fun things about Star Trek, is that if you think it's arguing one way, it could be, but it could be arguing the other way about, the good and bad aspects of socialized medicine. So, that's fun. Next is Inside Man, where Barclay transports over, and I don't enjoy it because I think that it's dumb that dumb Ferengis can reprogram the Barclay bot enough to not be noticed by even, like, B'Elanna or the Doctor or anybody with programming skills. Like, none of them can spot the difference. That's dumb. Next is Body and Soul, where the Doctor is forced to hide in Seven's cortical node for a bit, and initially, we gotta hide him, boom, that makes sense. But once they fixed the mobile emitter, there is no reason to put him back in 7 other than for comedy. Because you fix the mobile emitter, you can be like, boop, 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 now it requires a password set of touching buttons in order to activate the Doctor, so that even if they find the instrument or whatever, they're not going to accidentally activate the Doctor. But no, they're like, we need to milk this funny Seven pretending to be the Doctor thing, or Jerry Ryan pretending to be the Doctor thing, for as much as we can. Don't get me wrong, she does a good job of acting like how the Doctor would act. So, great actress, but the concept, it just got a little thin after they fixed mobile emitter. Anywho, moving on to Body and Soul. Sorry, that was Body and Soul. Moving on to Nightingale. It's dumb. It's just real dumb. I like that it has Shepard Book in it from Firefly, but it's dumb that Harry has been looking at good command. Like, Janeway, Tuvok, Chakotay, they each have their own way of being in command of X number of people, and he's been able to witness that. And you're telling me that after 7 years, he has no fucking idea how to not be the most goddamn incompetent commander of a ship ever? Like literally any leadership or management classes, I'm sure, are like, hey, we're gonna watch this episode of Kim. Don't do any fucking thing that he does because he's acting like an idiot. Every single time. Everything he does is terrible. And it's dumb because I have much higher faith in Kim than that he wouldn't have been like that. So, fuck you writers for not making things how they would have been. Moving on to Flesh and Blood. Once again, I think it's fun to see and have a contrast with Doctor, who's a good hologram, versus bad holograms. Yeah, you could argue like, oh, they're mistreated, blah, blah, blah. But really, what this comes down to is power corrupts, and that guy's a megalomaniac. So, it was fun, once again, to see that and explore that aspect, because I think that was a well that has not been tapped too much. Moving on from there to Shattered. You know, I like Chakotay. I like that he got this episode as like his thing, and I love any excuse to bring back Seska, so I was super happy that they found a reason that made sense to bring back Seska once again. Also, the team up at the very end, super awesome. I wasn't quite expecting that. Once I watched it, I was like, oh, I should have been expecting that, of course. But I like that it felt a little unexpected for me as a viewer who's seen this a bunch of times. I was just like, oh, hey, nice. And I still enjoyed the whole thing. So this is one of my, I would say, favorite episodes because it's one of the more interesting takes on a like, hey, remember this in the earlier seasons kind of episode. So as opposed to just doing like flashback sequences of like, oh, remember, and then they're just replaying scenes. This, I think, was a much more interesting way to do it. Okay, moving on to from Shattered to Lineage. Lineage is basically like Gattaca for Star Trek. Gattaca is an excellent movie. You should check it out if you haven't already. But once again, Klingon blood solves everything. So that's really all this movie is like, hey, remember Gattaca? We're going to do a Star Trek version, and because Klingons. And then next is Repentance. So Repentance is... it's fun, because what I like about it is that it shows that there is at least a chance that a serial criminal, or a criminal doing all these bad things, is doing it because there's something damaged in their brain. And you will never fix them because you don't have the ability to fix their brain, so they will just be a criminal and continue to do criminal things because we can't fix their brain. But that if we had the technology of Star Trek to fix whatever was damaged, like, you know, either through an accident or whatever else, like, if we could fix that brain damage, then they could become a productive, caring member of society. And I love that. And I also love that they also had the other guy who was like, nope, I'm just a straight up fucking criminal. Like, I have no remorse. Like, it has nothing to do with anything to do with genetics or any accidents or anything else. Like, nothing to do with any of that. I'm just a bad guy who likes being the criminal that I am and is not brain damaged. So I like that they showed, like, hey, there's this possibility, and then, but that's not to discount that there are just bad people in the world. So I think that's a fun way of looking at, you know, prisoners and why people go to prison and why they have recidivism a little bit. It doesn't address all the things because that's a huge reason and like all these other things. But I thought that it was an interesting take and a way to explore that. Also, I appreciated, it's an interesting take on the justice system of like, hey, the family of the people that were impacted are the ones who have felt the impact the most. So they should get to determine what the punishment is. And I think that is super interesting, other than for organized crime, where if you don't decide, like, yeah, I don't have any hard feelings, let that person go, because I don't want the rest of my family killed. So other than for organized crime type thing, I think that is an interesting justice system concept. I don't know how we would be able to implement it, but I think for the most part, that is an interesting way to consider for punishment. Moving on from there to prophecy, I think that they made that decision a little quick, and once again, Klingon blood solves everything. So, I don't know, I'm kind of over Klingons. Moving on to The Void. And so it's a fun episode because they're trying to show you the power of teamwork. Like, if we all just work together, we can escape this bad environment, and we can pool our resources and do the good things and share components and yada, yada, yada. And it's showing the goodness of teamwork. But it's also kind of showing why the Mafia works. Because they show that, like, hey, we're going to kick you out for not aligning with our viewpoints. And then, like, okay, so this is the Mafia. If you don't do what we say, we're going to kick you out. And yes, we're talking about Voyager being the good guys. But also, they then inspire teamwork for the bad guys to do the more Mafia-style things of, like, we're going to teamwork together to be bad. So, racketeering kind of works, and teamwork, but also Mafia. So it's fun to see and think about it from that perspective. But an otherwise fun episode. And then after that is Workforce. So do you think it would have been better to have left them programmed to be happy? So, should they have left them? And I think that Workforce Part 1 and Part 2 is a great exploration of that, because their lives are all about they're missing out on back home. So they are journeying to try and get back home, and they will forever be longing for Alpha Quadrant and their home. And in this one, they're just programmed. And yes, Tuvok is having issues because, Vulcan, and Seven because Borg and interaction with the Vulcan. But other than that, like, do you think that, would it have been better to leave them? Because all of them were happy. Like, they were programmed to be happy, and it seemed to be working, and they were having effective, fulfilling, happy lives. I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Also, I feel real bad for the captain, because she and that dude had great chemistry, and, it's just unfortunate that they could never be once she regained her memories. So that's another thing where I feel bad, because the captain has been left out. But it's another good way of integrating a love interest for the captain in a way that makes sense. Not part of her crew, she doesn't remember, but that guy is smart and fun and enjoyable. So, yeah, one of my favorite two-parters. Next is Human Errors, where, Seven is exploring her newfound humanity, and then, so I think it's dumb that there's a failsafe that keeps her from doing that, and yet we see her later on, and I don't know, it just seems like one of those things where they should have been able to solve it in this episode. They didn't solve it in this episode. This episode shouldn't have happened, because I don't think that would be a failsafe that the Borg would feel the need to implement. And then also, the Doctor should have been able to fix that in this episode, but he can definitely, given time, fix it, much like, the other problems that he eventually figures out how to fix because convenience, I don't know, plot armor. The other thing that really bugs me about this episode is that we have already had the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode where Kira becomes absolutely, like, livid and offended, and, like, everybody's like, dude, not cool, not appropriate to sell her dimensions and her image and her likeness as a holosuite program for, the douchey alien to get with. But in this episode, we're all just supposed to be okay with the fact that Seven has programmed a Chakotay and is having sex with it. Like, if you reverse it for the male and female part, and you're somehow not okay with it at that point, then you shouldn't be okay with it in this version. So I'm not okay with what Seven decided to do with a programmed version of Chakotay and Chakotay's likeness, because imagine if you have a husband or wife or, father, sister, mother, daughter, brother, whatever, and somebody programs a likeness of them to have sex with. Would you be okay with that? Probably not. So, yeah, if you can't switch the roles and reverse them and still be okay with it, you shouldn't be okay with it. So this, I think, was a error on the writer's part to try to give an excuse for Seven to like be developing feelings, because not okay. I've beat that dead horse enough. Moving on. Q2. Yay for another Q episode. Always love a good Q episode, and I liked his kid. I don't know who the actor is, but I thought he did a really good job of playing up the Q bit, and I also liked that, you know, he was a lot more fun without his powers. I liked the lessons that they were learning and the decisions that he was making and the growth that he was slowly showing, and I just thought that all around this was a really fantastic episode, and I liked that he was able to remember some of the like tricks of the trade of being a Q even when he didn't have the powers. That being said, once again we have another method of travel, the interplexing or interdimensional, I don't remember the terminology they used for it, but the phase gateway, whatever. Point is, another thing that uses the technology that they already have to go dozens, hundreds, thousands, I don't know how many light years, but a lot faster than warp. And then we don't ever see them implement this again. And they didn't even come up with a reason of like, oh, this only works with the Delta Flyer because it's small. Nope. You literally have no reason that it couldn't work for the crew of the Voyager to implement on Voyager. So, I mean, fun, but also, oops. So then next is author, and the lesson there is don't be an asshole to your friends. I think that's a good lesson. You shouldn't be an asshole to your friends. And yeah, the other thing is that it's a fun revisit of the is Data a person or not? Because they did that awesome like trial episode thing where, you know, Picard was defending Data that he is a person and not a construct, so like his works are his. And so in this one, same sort of thing, like, hey, the hologram came up with this story, but I can do whatever I want with it because you don't have the copyright to it because he's not a person. And I think that it's even more relevant today than when this episode was made. Because when this episode was made, and for years of me viewing this, I, you know, loving Robert Picardo, loving the Doctor from Voyager, just loving this crew, of course I was on the Doctor's side, like, hell yes, he's a person. Yeah, he is definitely a person and has all those rights and he should, and like, that's utterly ridiculous that you could even be arguing this. That a algorithm just based on interactions and based on all the sum of the things that were entered into it, and then further interaction after that using the learning algorithms that it has, is somehow not considered a person. Have y'all heard of ChatGPT? It's made the news a whole bunch recently. ChatGPT. Think about, would you consider ChatGPT to be a person? Why is the Doctor a person and ChatGPT is not? Vice versa. Go ahead, debate that in the comments below. But it's these type of things that you think about, and why Star Trek is so amazing, because it has the philosophical concepts that resonate sometimes even more decades later. Okay, moving on to Friendship 1. Once again, you know, nuclear radiation, bad, and leaders holding on to power, bad. I feel like we had this episode in the SG-1 episode already, and this one's okay, but it's a fun to show that, like, hey, people who have power are going to try and hold on to it. Also, that nuclear weapons are bad. Cool. Next is natural law. Meh. This late in the game to have this. Essentially, it's, once again, leave indigenous people alone. Yeah, we got it. You've beat this dead horse a lot in Star Trek. Move on already. Next is Homestead. I don't think they should have gotten rid of Neelix. I think that there was zero indication for the past 7 seasons that Neelix misses his home or misses his people. I have not gotten that feeling whatsoever, and then suddenly he's like, oh, I'm so sad without my people, and now I finally have some, so I'm going to join them and leave you guys. Goodbye. So I think that that's bullshit. And then the other thing is that asteroid needed to be way bigger for the number of people that they had, and the fact that it had geothermal power and gravity, like, bullshit, that needed to be a whole fucking planetoid. And on top of that, there needed to be more Talaxians, because only 500, that's such a small number. Like, I know that it sounds like a large number, but to have a, like, genetically continuable society, 500, I don't think is enough. But I did appreciate that he had chemistry with the chick and with the son, and, like, Neelix is definitely a dad. He was a dad to Naomi, he's a dad just to the crew, and so he definitely needed a family to go to, as opposed to just deciding to stay with Talaxians in general. He needed to have that family, and he and the mom definitely had chemistry, so I appreciate that. And it's so fun to think of Neelix as an awesome dad figure versus the, like, nefarious, like, gonna try and get you for all your worth guy from season 1, episode 1 of Star Trek Voyager. So it's fun to see that character change, not just progression, but they were just like, changing that around. So still don't think this episode should have happened, but whatever. For having to have the episode, the chemistry was good. Next is Renaissance Man. The doc definitely made a stupid choice. He should have listened to the captain when she said not to do it. He shouldn't have done it. Those people are not intimidating. Like, there were so many times where he could have just, like, revealed the thing, and it would have just been better. That being said, it was fun to see him do, like, the quick changes and the, like, feats that only a hologram can do. So it was fun to see him running around like that, but I didn't appreciate his choice. I thought it was poor. And then last, Endgame, she goes back in time to save essentially Tuvok and some of other people, but like, think about how many hundreds of lives were drastically altered. And that's just like first tier. Yeah, like millions, billions, whatever can be altered. But just the fact that, all those kids that were born on Voyager were never born now. Like, that's huge. The other thing that, and you could argue those implications for pretty much any of the time travel changing episodes, but with this one, so she has 40 year advanced technology for the armor and the weapons for Voyager that she puts them on there. And yeah, the Borg weren't initially able to break through, but now they have those super detailed scans of the weapons and the armor, and now they have 20 years to study it. So if the Borg plague thing hadn't worked, like, how drastically would you have shifted the power in the quadrant? Because now they have the scans that they can study before you even develop that technology. Because with the Temporal Prime Directive, I'm sure that Starfleet would be unwilling to implement the new armor and weapons things that they found on Voyager. So do you think she made the right decision with all the lives that she immediately affected, as well as the ripple effects and the butterfly effects all down the stream for everything else? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think that the last interaction with the Borg Queen was very well shot. I don't know that I buy a virus taking out the Borg because the Borg are a virus, but it is kind of fun and poetic that a virus took out a virus, so that's fun. So I like that interaction. I don't know that I all the way buy it, but I think that it was a good way to, take the Borg off the playing field, have a good, defeat of an enemy, as well as the homecoming. So, do you think she made the right decision? That's the other thing that I would like to hear about in the comments down below. So that's season 7. I love the whole show. I think season 5 might have been my favorite based on this most recent rewatch and how much I really loved episodes. But I had a favorite episode or 2 or more in every single season. So definitely give this a shot. And hopefully you've enjoyed my recap, my review of this show. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you at the next one. Bye.